A single perfect note from a cello, full and rich, hangs in the air of a grand, sunlit gallery. But as we watch, a single, vibrant stroke of crimson in a masterpiece on the wall begins to fade, turning to a dull, lifeless gray. And the cello note withers, dying into a dry, hollow rasp. They told you the Grand Athenaeum was a gift to the world, a cathedral of inspiration, where any artist, composer, or poet could come to touch the sublime, to find their muse in its hallowed halls. But the artists who entered left a little quieter, a little less bright. The Athenaeum was not a muse, it was a siphon, a magnificent architectural machine designed to drain the creative spark from 1,000 souls and funnel it into a single, chosen vessel. Before we enter its halls, you must ask yourself, do you create or are you consumed? This channel is for those who understand that true genius is often not born but stolen. If you have ever felt the spark of an idea inexplicably vanish, if you fear the silence of a blank page, then subscribe and learn the architecture of the theft. The horror of the Athenaeum was not malice, it was efficiency, a cold, calculated process of artistic transference disguised as the ultimate act of philanthropy. Our story begins in the city of Viridia, at the turn of the 20th century, a city incandescent with art, music, and new ideas. And at its heart, the great industrialist and recluse, Silas Blackwood, announced his final greatest gift to the city, the Athenaeum, a public temple to the Muses built from white marble and vast panes of glass. In truth, it was his final, perfect engine, a machine not for making steel, but for distilling genius. And the city's artists, drawn by the promise of inspiration, would be its fuel. The architect of this engine was Silas Blackwood, a man who had built an empire of steel and steam, only to realize that the world's most valuable resource was not iron or coal, but the fleeting electrical fire of human genius. He was a recluse, seen only in fleeting glimpses, a severe skeletal figure with eyes the color of a dying fire, eyes that did not see art but measured it. He believed inspiration was not a gift from God, it was a quantifiable energy, a current that could be harnessed, redirected, and stored. The public face of the Athenaeum, the man who welcomed the artists with open arms, was Julian Croft, the curator. He was everything Blackwood was not, charming, handsome, and passionate, with a voice that could speak of color and line as if they were living things. He was a failed painter himself, a man who possessed a perfect, aching appreciation for the genius he lacked. This made him the perfect lure. He knew the hunger of the artist, the desperate thirst for inspiration, and he offered them a deep, cool well from which to drink, never telling them it was their own creative lifeblood they were tasting. The Athenaeum itself was Blackwood's masterpiece of engineering. The sunlit galleries were designed with a terrible hidden purpose. The vast panes of glass were not just for illumination, they were focal lenses. The white marble floors were laced with a fine, powdered quartz, chosen for its resonant properties. The perfect acoustics of the music halls were not for the pleasure of the audience, they were designed to capture and channel the stray notes of brilliance. The very geometry of the building, the precise angles of the walls, the sweeping curves of the arches, was a form of silent, passive acoustic engineering, designed to guide the faint, ethereal energy of creation from the public studios down into the building's secret heart. Deep in the foundations, beneath the white marble, lay the resonance chamber, a sphere of polished copper and brass, humming with a low, almost subsonic frequency. This was Blackwood's sanctum, the collection plate for his entire enterprise. Here, the siphon genius of 100 artists was focused, concentrated, and stored. The first to feel the full effect of the machine was Alara, a young painter of astonishing, untamed talent. Her work was a blaze of color and emotion, a raw, unfocused fire. Croft saw her potential immediately. He offered her the one thing she craved, a private, sun-drenched studio on the Athenaeum's top floor, a room of her own, a place to finally unleash the storm inside her. For the first month it was heaven. Inspiration came in waves, a torrential downpour of ideas. She painted with a feverish energy, creating works that were bolder, more brilliant than anything she had ever imagined. The building itself seemed to sing to her, to amplify her own genius. But then the process began to reverse. The colors on her palette started to look dull. The sunlight pouring through the vast window seemed thinner, weaker. The flood of ideas slowed to a trickle, then stopped. She would stand before a blank canvas for hours, her mind a silent, white room. The fire had not just been tamed, it was being extinguished. He blamed herself. She was a fraud. The initial burst of genius had been a fluke. She was experiencing the artist's most profound terror, the belief that the wellspring had run dry. An old, cynical sculptor named Rees, who had known Alara for years, saw the truth. He visited her in her magnificent studio and was horrified. It was not just that her new canvases were blank, it was Alara herself. The vibrant, chaotic energy that had always surrounded her was gone. Her eyes, which had once burned with ideas, were quiet and tired. He looked at her, then at the perfect, beautiful, silent room, and a terrible understanding dawned on him. He wrote in his journal that night, "I visited Alara today in her white marble cage. She believes her muse has abandoned her. I believe it has been stolen. The life, the very color, has been drained from her, and I swear the building itself seems brighter for it. The Athenaeum is not a temple. It is a slaughterhouse for the soul, and its walls are fat and sleek with the ghosts of 1,000 beautiful ideas." The Athenaeum became the sun around which Viridia's artistic world orbited. Composers, poets, sculptors, and painters flocked to its halls, and for a time the city experienced a renaissance of unprecedented brilliance. But a strange pattern began to emerge. An artist would arrive, produce a flurry of their most genius work within the Athenaeum's walls, and then, inevitably, their talent would wither and die, leaving them creatively barren, burned-out husks. The city saw only the beautiful explosion of art. They did not see the quiet trail of ghosts left in its wake. Julian Croft, with a face of tragic sympathy, would offer these burned-out artists a quiet pension, a patronage from Blackwood to honor their past contributions. In reality, it was hush money. The siphoned energy had a destination. Silas Blackwood had a son, Arthur, a quiet, sullen boy of 10 who possessed none of his father's drive and not a single spark of artistic talent. His drawings were clumsy, his attempts at the piano discordant. He was the one great failure in Silas's world of perfect engines, so Silas decided to rebuild him. While the city's greatest talents were unknowingly being drained in the sunlit galleries above, Arthur was taken to the copper resonance chamber deep below. He would be placed in a single chair at the sphere's center. Then the process would begin. Blackwood, at a massive control panel, would open the conduits. The collected creative energy of the Athenaeum would flow into the chamber, not as light or sound, but as a silent, shimmering, multi-hued aurora of pure potential. It would envelop the boy, who sat in a deep, hypnotic trance guided by Croft. It was not a lesson, it was an infusion, a direct transference of stolen genius. The results were immediate and miraculous. Arthur, who could barely draw a stick figure, began to paint. His first work was a small landscape. When Croft showed it to Blackwood, the old industrialist's eyes gleamed with triumph. The painting was technically flawless, and more than that, the brushwork, the use of color, the very soul of the piece. It was unmistakably Alara's, a perfect, soulless echo of her fiery genius. Rees the sculptor saw Arthur's painting at a private showing. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He recognized the artistic DNA of his friend, Alara, as surely as if she had signed the canvas. But the painting was signed Arthur Blackwood. He now knew the Athenaeum wasn't just draining artists. It was a refinery, pumping the raw, creative crude oil of the many into the empty vessel of a chosen one. His investigation became a quiet obsession. He spent his nights watching the Athenaeum, a silent old man against a silent marble giant. He found what he was looking for, a service entrance, left unlocked during a late-night cleaning shift. He slipped inside, his footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls that felt charged with a strange, latent energy. He followed the faint, low hum that he could now feel in his teeth down, past the public galleries, into the foundations of the building. He found a hidden door behind a large tapestry, a door that led to a copper-lined corridor. It led to the resonance chamber. Through a thick quartz porthole, he witnessed the transference. He saw young Arthur, glowing in the center of the aurora of stolen genius. He saw Blackwood at the controls, his face alight with a sterile, proprietary joy. And he saw Croft, the failed artist, looking on with an expression of mingled awe and profound self-loathing. But Rees found something more. In a small office adjoining the chamber, he found Blackwood's ledgers. They were not financial books. They were acquisition logs. Each page was dedicated to an artist. It listed their initial creative output, their peak resonance, and chillingly their rate of decay. It was the cold, hard data of their spiritual murder, Alara. Page was there, her decay rate logged at 87%. There were dozens of other names. A poet who had lost his words. A composer who could no longer hear music. Each one a source, milked dry, and then discarded. This is the moment of absolute clarity, when the witness understands the full, terrible design of the machine. The fear you feel for your own spark, your own inspiration, is a primal one. It is the fear of the empty page, the silent studio. It is the fear of being consumed. Now is the time to declare your sovereignty over that spark. In the comments below, make this vow. State it twice to make it real. My fire is my own. My fire is my own. Reese stood in the heart of the engine of theft, the proof in his hands. But what could one old man do? He was a sculptor of stone, not a destroyer of systems. Blackwood was untouchable, his power absolute. To expose him would be to accuse a god. Reese knew he could not fight the machine head-on. He had to do what a true artist does. He had to introduce a flaw. A beautiful, terrible, resonant flaw that would shake the entire perfect structure to its foundations. Reese's plan was a masterpiece of artistic warfare. He did not go to the press or the police. He went to Julian Croft, the curator, and proposed his final, greatest work, a monumental sculpture to be placed in the Athenaeum's grand central rotunda, the very nexus of the building's power. He called it the Sorrow of the Muse. He described it as a tribute to the divine melancholy of creation, a concept so tragically romantic that Croft, the failed artist, wept at its profundity. Blackwood, when informed, approved immediately. He saw it as the ultimate acquisition, the swan song of a master, a fountain of pure, high-quality creative energy to be siphoned and stored. For 6 months, Reese worked. He chose a rare, black marble from a quarry in the north, a stone known for its unusual density and its faint, almost undetectable veins of lead. He worked not with inspiration, but with a cold, focused rage. He poured every ounce of his own sorrow, his grief for Alara, and his contempt for Blackwood's machine into the stone. He sculpted a muse, but not one of inspiration. This muse was weeping, her face a mask of beautiful, perfect despair, her hands held out not to offer a gift, but as if begging for one. It was a perfect vessel for creative agony. The day the statue was unveiled was a grand affair. The city's elite gathered. Julian Croft gave a moving speech about Reese's genius and the profound sadness of the artistic soul. The statue stood in the center of the rotunda, a void of black marble that seemed to drink the light of the room, radiating a silent, majestic sorrow. The artists who looked upon it felt a strange, sympathetic chill. It was beautiful, but it was the beauty of an empty canvas, of a silent instrument. That night in the copper sphere deep below, the ritual began. Arthur Blackwood was placed in his chair, ready for the infusion. His father, Silas, stood at the control panel, anticipating the richest harvest yet, the pure, concentrated genius and sorrow of Reese's masterpiece. He opened the conduits. But the statue did not radiate, it absorbed. The black, lead-veined marble acted as a dissonant sink. As the siphoned creative energies of the Athenaeum flowed through the rotunda, the statue drew them in, but it did not channel them, it inverted them. The vibrant, colorful energy of inspiration, the clear, resonant notes of musical genius, the bright fire of poetry, it all flowed into the statue's core and was transmuted. It became a thick, gray, leaden sludge of pure creative despair, apathy, the terror of the blank page. The artist's deepest and most profound horror, the certainty that the wellspring is dry forever. This corrupted, negative energy, amplified by the building's own resonant systems, flooded the conduits leading to the resonance chamber. Arthur, sitting in his chair, was not enveloped by a rainbow of stolen genius. He was drowned in a tidal wave of concentrated artistic death. The aurora that filled the chamber was not a shimmering multi-hued light. It was a sickly, churning vortex of black and gray. The boy began to scream, a raw, guttural sound of pure psychic agony. He clawed at his own eyes, as if to tear out the images of perfect, empty canvases. He tore at his ears to block the sound of silent, broken instruments. The perfect vessel, force-fed the concentrated despair of 100 stolen souls, had shattered. Silas Blackwood watched in horror, his face a mask of disbelief. The needles on his dials spun wildly into the red. His perfect engine was producing the opposite of its design. It was not creating a genius, it was manufacturing a madman. He lunged for the master switch to shut down the flow, but it was too late. The conduits, never designed to handle this negative, corrosive energy, began to overload. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber as the delicate copper wiring began to glow sea. Harry red, then melt. The great machine, poisoned by a single perfect work of art, was tearing itself apart. Reese, a single old man, had not just introduced a flaw. He had given the Athenaeum a soul, and the soul he had given it was one of absolute, perfect despair. The overload was catastrophic. The resonance chamber did not explode, it imploded. The delicate copper sphere, unable to contain the violent psychic feedback, collapsed in on itself with a silent, sickening crunch. The psychic shockwave ripped upwards through the building, following the very conduits that had been designed to siphon genius. In the sunlit galleries above, the art died. The vibrant reds in the masterpieces on the walls instantly faded to the color of dried blood. The proud marble of the statues developed hairline cracks. A profound, unnatural silence fell over the entire building, a silence so deep it felt like a pressure, a final exhalation. The Athenaeum, its heart ripped out, had become a mausoleum. The human cost was far worse. Every artist who had ever been drained by the building, no matter where they were in the city, felt the psychic echo of its death. They were gripped by a sudden, inexplicable wave of absolute despair, a final, crushing confirmation of their own creative emptiness. There was a string of suicides among the city's artistic community that week, a tragedy the papers attributed to the melancholy temperament of the artist. Silas Blackwood was found in the wreckage of his laboratory, not physically harmed, but his mind utterly annihilated. He sat amidst the ruined machinery, staring at his son, Arthur, who now huddled in a corner, endlessly sketching the same image over and over again with a piece of charcoal, a beautiful, weeping face. The perfect vessel was permanently imprinted with the image of his unmaking. Blackwood, the man who saw genius as a resource, had spent the rest of his days as the sole caretaker of the monster he had created. Julian Croft vanished. Overwhelmed by his guilt and complicity, he simply walked away from the ruined Athenaeum and was never seen again. Henrice, the sculptor, was found the next morning, sitting peacefully on a bench opposite the Athenaeum, a faint, weary smile on his face. He had watched his masterpiece perform its terrible, beautiful work. He had given the lie to the entire enterprise. He did not offer an explanation. He simply stated that he was, at last, finished. He never sculpted again. He had poured all that was left of his own creative soul into that single, final act of rebellion. The Athenaeum was closed, declared structurally unsound. The official story was that Blackwood's experimental electrical systems had caused a catastrophic fire in the foundations. The building stood for years, a magnificent empty tomb, its white marble slowly graying, its vast windows staring out like the vacant eyes of a lobotomized genius. Blackwood's surviving family, ashamed and terrified of the secret, eventually had it torn down. But the art that had been created within its walls during its brief, brilliant renaissance, survived. It hangs in the great museums of the world today. Critics marvel at its intensity, at the feverish, almost suicidal burst of creativity from that period in Viridia's history. They speak of a collective, mysterious muse that visited the city for a single, incandescent decade and then vanished as quickly as it came. They admire the work. They praise the genius. They never, ever ask the price. The tale of the Athenaeum is the secret history of inspiration. It is a testament to a chilling, unspoken truth. That genius is a finite resource, a fire that, when shared, can warm the world, but when hoarded becomes an inferno that consumes the very souls it feeds on. Silas Blackwood did not create a monster. He simply perfected a process that is as old as art itself, the quiet, vampiric consumption of the brilliant by the powerful. His engine was not a machine of copper and quartz. It was a metaphor for a system that still exists. The Athenaeum is the corporate studio that owns the artist's soul, the record label that mass-produces feeling, the digital platform that rewards endless shallow creation while draining the wellspring of true, deep work. It is the culture that celebrates the finished, polished product, but refuses to acknowledge the burnout, the despair, and the human cost of its creation. Every day you walk through the halls of a new Athenaeum. You are invited in, encouraged to share your spark, your idea, your passion. And every day, the silent, invisible machine siphons a little piece of it, concentrating the creative energy of millions into the hands of a few. Your inspiration is not your own. It is their raw material. But Reese the sculptor left us a blueprint for rebellion. You cannot destroy the machine, but you can poison it with the one thing it cannot process, a difficult, beautiful, and inconvenient truth you can choose to see. Read not for consumption, but for catharsis. You can create something that is so intensely, honestly, and painfully human that it clogs the gears and cracks the conduits. Now you must make a choice. Are you fuel for their engine, or are you the flaw in their design? In the comments below, it is time to make your vow, a declaration of creative sovereignty. State it twice. My fire is my own. My fire is my own. This is not a gesture, it is a shield, a statement that your soul, your spark, your muse is not for sale. If you are ready to continue this rebellion, to expose the modern engines of theft and celebrate the beautiful, difficult art of the soul. Subscribe. Activate the notification bell because the hum of the machine is constant and designed to be ignored. Share this with one other creator, one other soul who you know feels the fire within them, and tell them to guard it well. They want your genius, they want your inspiration. Give them your truth instead, and watch their perfect machine shatter.